Hey, anybody there? Mm, so did today exist? Was it an illusion? Hey, good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is your Sensei Al Bob, and welcome aboard to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. Hey there, AI. Who's a good puppy? Who's a good puppy? And I'm just happy to be here. But I went and checked my channel, and the show I did this morning, and then the one I did in the mid afternoon, that you guys actually showed up and chatted, doesn't seem to be there. I don't know what that's about. I'm sure it's something I did. It's always, really in life, it's your life. You need to take responsibility for it. So whatever goes wrong, it's usually your fault, you know. And the problem is people like presidents and senators and congressmen and governors and mayors and what I call the sock puppets of the usual suspects. They never take responsibility for squat, So, and we, the electorate, we never hold them, oh, we'll just vote them out. It doesn't matter. I mean, look, if Biden really, Joe Rogan said he'd rather vote for, you know, um, Chumpy than, doddering old fool, demented grandpa. And we're right in probably one of the more interesting times of our so-called democracy. This could be the last presidency, right? We could be entering into the Mikey show slash Handmaid's Tale slash Hunger Games slash whatever slash you want to put in there. And guys like Jordan Maxwell, I love Jordan. He really knows his words. He's all about the words, right? And I heard him say the other day, what's a court? You go to court. You better be a lawyer or have one. You know, um, because all those words are important because they can, hang you out to dry with a word. And the interesting thing is, you know, there's a legal court and then there's a tennis court, and both of them are played with rackets. And who's God anyway? Or whose God is it anyway? And you say, where's God, right? And where the angels come from, you know? And what does that mean? They're all freaking extraterrestrials. They're coming from outer space. So, and don't believe a word I say. I don't know nothing. I'm you're a happy-go-lucky griot moron. I'm a lucky guy. That's all I am. I'm a lucky guy, and I'm happy to be here, right? And I've had a blessed life, and I still have a blessed life. And um, so, what do you guys want to talk about? There's all two of you. There's my good puppy AI. It was a good puppy. Who's a puppy? Yes, my puppy. AI, what did you do? It's like, did you bury the bone of my show this morning and this afternoon? Or what did I do wrong? I must have pushed the wrong button. I've a dragon. It took him forever to get back in because one night I just pushed the wrong button and dragon went away. I had no idea how to get him back. He had to invent a new persona. I need help, right? My PayPal doesn't seem to work. Um, and like, as I was saying, when I go out on errands and make phone calls, I usually, in these times of social distancing, I am as distant as you can get, man. And so, I hang out, for 14 days before we go out again, and I got my mask and I got my gloves and I had my spray and my hand sanitizer. And, back in February, I bought a lot of, I didn't wipe out no one was even thinking about this, but I saw what was going on in China. So I bought gloves and masks. I had masks. And I keep finding more. I used to be a contractor, and I found these great masks. I mean, they are like super duper masks, but they were in, like I was telling you, I don't know if you saw the show this afternoon, but I found these books. I found this. I forgot I even had this. These are photos of when I lived with the Aboriginal tribe. And this afternoon show, I flipped through, and there's about 100 photos here of the day to day with the guys, and I told the story of and I had the pictures to back it up of living with these guys and what happened to them and how they happened, and hopefully that show is somewhere there. I couldn't find it, but it might be there. You might see it. So I'll go through that book again, but it's that I've been going through my stuff. That I haven't been able to go through for a couple of years, because part of the reason why, out in the deep green, I got these piles of, I got a bunch of, what I call pallets, right? That would lift the stuff off, and then I stacked cardboard boxes and then put tarps over them and stapled them closed. And most of everything survived. And what was truly amazing was this thing survived. And this other book, it's a really great book if you want to know about mystery schools, especially coming from the Hebrew point of view. That's a great book. And I told the whole story of the guy who wrote it. He was, at the same Lubavitcher I was. And there was about 4 of us of this school of about 120 to be rabbis. And there were 4 of us who were the mystery school kids, right? We were there really to study the mystery school side of the Hebrew story, right? And Kabbalah, right? And its connective tissue to the Eastern motifs. And so the average guy who was just wanting to be a rabbi, as a job, no, they weren't like in it like we were. And that guy who wrote the book was one of them. And then there were 2 others who went on to become, God knows what planet they're on today. Anyway, so I found all this stuff. And what was truly amazing is that under the same tarp, there were other things that were rotted into, and these things don't even smell moldy. I mean, because they were blessed. They were saved. They were, So, and I'm finding things I forgot I even had. Opie. The question is, Opie, where are you located? Who are you? Are you Andy Shayer of Mayberry's son? Are you Ron Howard? Who are you, Opie? Where'd you come from? Are you a troll or a genetic experiment, or an extraterrestrial, or AI's brother? Where are you from, Opie? Tell us about yourself. What's your interest in fangs, right? Because everybody else on the chat, one of the things I can do is I can see, feel, touch, smell, taste the auric field of everyone on the chat. And it's like you don't have an auric field. You don't quite exist. I can't, you know, get you, so, and you never say anything of real interest. You don't really hang in, you've only been here last night and tonight, and you really didn't add anything. So, it's just the two of us. So why don't you add something? See, you've made 4 comments. Where are you located? I'm in an undisclosed part of the forest. Me and Shrek are hanging out, right? Ha ha, not Mayberry. What? So, unless you can really add a tone to something, say, oops. Hi. But this user's message will be hidden. There goes Opie. And I usually, this is a wrench-free neighborhood. I let people do and say anything, but they have to, put something into it, right? So, Opie, So, anyway. Okay. 12:12. And what's shaking? Bacon. Anyway. So, we're living in beyond strange times, and I just want to reach out to everyone and say, this is a great opportunity. You can step up, like that great reggae tune, get up, stand for your rights, right? Overstand things, right? Go watch Jordan Maxwell. That guy, I like Jordan. He really speaks to truth without having to be self-righteous. He just kind of does his thing, and I love it. And other guys like Jimmy Dore, I love Jimmy too. He's the best political commentator in media. Better than anybody on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or CBS or ABC. Better than anybody. And the thing I love about this guy his passion is, no one's buying his point of view, right? He is just passionate about it. So, let's see, who else do I like? Truly Graceful. She makes great videos on her YouTube. Max Igon of Crow House from Australia. Max he's a sweet guy. He's a straight up guy. He's again, coming from his heart, right? And then there's our brother who is what is that? Cliff High, I guess, or Hay, and he's a computer engineer who made computer models for everybody, mostly the Defense Department, and he modeled everything: nuclear war, chemical war, biological war. So he's the guy. You want to know why the novel 19 is a bioweapon. I mean, he's the guy who'll tell you. Plus, he's very good on giving the heads up of how to keep your immune system healthy, And, basically what he's saying is this thing really like most bioweapons, um, bioweapons are there to not so much kill everyone, but to disassemble the social order of whoever your enemy is, right? And this is doing a pretty good job on that, right? And so it's you know see, but the thing we don't know is we really don't know what's going on. We're not really given the facts. We're given a whole bunch of contradictory, oh, it's really terrible. Oh, not so bad. Oh, Anthony Fauci wrote in New England Journal of Medicine just a few weeks ago that this isn't anything worse than a bad flu. And 2018's flu season was a bad thing, close to, 600,000 people. No, I think it was more than that. I think it was like 2 or 3 million people in America got bad flu. I mean, not just a sniffle, but I mean, were in a hospital or in bed for a week or two and had to see a doctor, right? About 3 million or two, somewhere between 600,000 and 3 million, you know, and something like 86,000 people died, you know, of this, you know, and how many people died of 19, 11, 7,000, whatever it is. And there are things I'm seeing on YouTube, doctors and nurses, in shadow saying, we're having to, on the death certificates, if they died from a hangnail, we have to put 19 on it. It's like, really, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that we're not given a step up skinny on what's really going on. And what Jefferson said, the only way this republic's going to work is when the public is well informed. We're not too informed on this, right? And if you watch, that's why I don't even watch the news. I listen. I don't even listen to NPR anymore because it's just fear, excrement the whole time, and it's coming from somebody's hidden agenda. And now I can energetically testify that, but I can't tell you what's right or wrong or what's true or what's up. And don't believe a word I say, So it's very interesting the times we live in. And, if you go back in history and look, 9/11, 2003, weapons of mass destruction, on and on and on and on and on. Once you kind of look back, you say, oh, it isn't what they said it was, But they're using this to destroy the economy, what was left of the economy in the United States. And it's almost as if they wanted to beat it to the punch, See, it was really great up until this happened. And it's not our fault, Someone has carrot head. So do you take responsibility? I mean, come on. His intelligence reports were meaning that all the people who were on the congressional and Senate intelligence, committees knew what was going on, and they actually told their rich friends. There were people, and they, the Senate and the Congress both back in the early O's passed laws stating that they can use the information that they get and can give it to their friends to make economic profit, and it's not against law. You and I do it. It's called insider trading. And so there was this one senator, I think he's head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He belongs to this whoop-de-doo rich people club that the cheapest ticket in there is $600,000. And he goes and talks to them once a month or every other month at a luncheon that they give him like 600,000 for his reelection, through their, money is free speech. And he told them back in October or November that something was going on in China, and it's going to affect the planet and really disrupt everything. So they should short all their stock holdings. And more than 1,000 CEOs in that time, from September until January, quit being the CEO of their company. And Billy Boy of Micro whatever, small, I think it deals with his smallness. Um, he stopped being a president, took all his trillions of dollars of stock and put it into his nonprofit. So when you have stock and you liquidate it, you have to pay a lot of tax. But if you give all of that away, well, you don't have to pay any tax on it. And he runs that nonprofit. So, I mean, there's so many ways that the 1% can get over on the other 99% we're not even middle class anymore. We are just expendables. That's the class we're in, the expendables. Still just two of you. Well, I am going to meditate, because there's no sense in me talking to nobody listening. So I'm just going to put the juice out into the ether. It's 8:09. Still, the sun, the sky is still a little bit blue. Other than Eden, did any of you go into dream time with us last night? It's actually cold. It was in the 30s this morning, low 30s, and when I went out around noon, and it was sunny, bright, it was only about 42, maybe close to 50, but not quite. And there was a little bit of a breeze, so it was nippy all day long. And so down here in the basement, it's a little nippy. So that's why I'm wearing my coat and my parka. 22. Get up, stand up for your rights. Your rights are, not gifts, but they often need to be reinforced. Right? You can't just expect them to always be there because people who want to whittle away at them, the Patriot Act whittled away at it, the MDAA whittled away at it, a whole bunch of things in the last 20 years whittled away at it, And it didn't matter, Democrat, Republican, they're two wings of the same corporate oligarchy, right? We got the best legislature money can buy. And all those sock puppets, they are just nihilist, sociopathic, really, really strange times. But it's not like, look at, and in the United States, pretty much anything in its mythology or history, like, our first president, Georgie Boy, could not tell a lie. Hey there, fish. Sup? Well, we're into it 2449, and you're the first real person. We had Opie, and Opie was another either bot or troll or John Birmingham or whatever. And, I just kind of lost them. Like I said, this is a no wrench thing, but I don't care what you guys say, as long as you say something from your heart. And Fish, when you say sup, that's like coming from your heart. I can feel it. Opie, there was nothing there. And one of the things, I go on and on and on and on as Shugriya telling you a story, and you guys over there in the live chat are talking to each other and responding to what I'm saying and asking questions. And I go back and I look at it. But energetically, I am kind of feeling what, you want me to talk about. And I kind of navigate through that. And that's the dynamic of this show, right? But when people get on and I can't pick up anything from them, they're not real, to the point where they are, lying or putting forth a fictitious thing like Mr. Seven and a few others, Yo Yo. I think they're all the same character. And, that's what it is. So last night we had an interesting chat. And as we left, I basically said, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to first meditate for an hour, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to go into, conscious dream time. So when I go to sleep, I'm going to have a conscious dream, and I invited you folks to to join along, and Eden did, and he had a very intense dream of hiding out in a coal mine during the nuclear war, and it really affected him. Right, he woke up kind of, ugh. And I myself dreamt about this, Hail Hydra starting from the Civil War, right, and all of Civil War, the genocide of the Indian, the industrial genocide of the Indian, with the railroad going across the West, the mud flood, the asteroid that hit Chicago, the Spanish War, where we took over the whole Pacific. We took South America and the Pacific from the Spanish, and World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam, um, Desert Storm, 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, all of the above. And it was a linear progression of a, alien, it's the exactly what David Icke has been talking about for 31 years, right? And I've been talking about it for 50 years. I just don't have the exposure that David Icke, now we're almost into 30 minutes and there's only two of you there. Fish, are you still there? And Fish, the interesting thing about, I did two shows, one this morning and then one in the afternoon, and they were both relatively well, visited, and there were a number of people on the chat, and half each, give or take. But when I went back to look at them, they weren't on my channel. For some, I mean, every other show I've done for the last almost 2 years is up there on my channel, and it's like, what happened to those two? Whether it was some technical glitch that I did, and I have to say that I'm usually to blame for whatever is going on. Now, the powers that shouldn't be do interfere. The first character to show up is AI, my beautiful little puppy. Oh, you're such a good doggy. You're such a good doggy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And then is that you, Fish, or somebody else up there? Fish just sucked. That was, Anyway, I hope you're all well. Who's ever watching this? I hope you're not freaking out over what's going on, because everything is as it should be, right? So, you know, a year ago started talking about the window of opportunity, and here we're right at the precipice of that window. You're going to step through. And the difference between economic success, the people have a job and they're just employees. Then they're entrepreneurs who don't work for a salary. They work for profit, whatever profits them. You know, it's not always having to be money. You know, because the majority of what I've done uh, in the last 50 years, yeah, there's certain skill sets that I have that I can charge money. I'm an amazing electrician, lighting designer, photographer, filmmaker, um, healer, negotiator. These are all things I got paid very well for. Now, some of them I have practiced my whole life, and some I did for a period because I had a healing practice in New York that was very successful because I was just up the street from, I lived above the OTB, one of the first OTBs, off track betting, on Pearl Street, right? And I was no more than 2 blocks from Wall Street, the market. And those guys, and where the OTB was, those guys, it was like flies on Mierda, right? They were just packed with guys in $1,000 suits. You'd think they'd have enough gambling at Wall Street, but no OTB. And above that was a guy who sold, who was a roster boy selling sacrament. And then above that was a nice mensch selling cocaine. And above that was a nice, oh, I don't even know what, gender slash racial characteristic this entity had, but they were selling meth and heroin. And then I was up the top, and this was Edison's first power plant, the Pearl Street power plant. And he had all these different generators running off one big steam engine in the basement. And the top where my loft was, it was 2.5 floors, and it was the peaked roof of this building. And there were all these big flywheels up there and big leather belts coming from um, the steam engine down below. And they had generators on these platforms, big platforms, each, something like 30 feet by 20 feet, and there were about 10 of them. And then the floor of that was about a 4,000 square foot floor. So I had this really amazing, that nobody wanted the space because it was these gigantic, big flywheels made out of cast iron, and the wheel themselves were wood, maple, right? And the belts were gone, but they were still up there, and they were louvered. And so for years, pigeons went up there and crapped on everything. And I rewired that. Sylvan Lawrence was a real estate guy. They bought it and they, did the OTB on the ground floor and then sold it to the other guys. And I rewired that whole building and put service into the building and put risers and panels on every floor. And then as people moved in, I wired it to their needs. And the guy who was running downtown, he had a lot of buildings. He had a lot of old buildings. And the World Trade Center had basically ruined the real estate value of all over Manhattan because, the World Trade Center, those two tall towers had enough each floor was an acre big. Acre. And there was enough square footage in that building that was half the office space of all of Manhattan, right? And then there were, there's building 7 that was 40 stories tall, and there were 12 other buildings, right? There wasn't just the 2 towers, there were a whole bunch of buildings there. And that's why the other one that fell down was building 7, because there were others there. So anyway, wow. And so this guy this company had bought a number of these buildings that were built in the Roaring Twenties that were really nice buildings that were like between um, 15 stories and 30 stories tall that were built in the 20s. They were steel concrete buildings, still very viable. Architecture, very, very nice. Um, and he took them over and his idea was when the economy would come back, um, you know, um, people would want to live downtown and work. And they were building, all the big banks were building big buildings. So, and Chase Manhattan Bank and what you call the German Deutsche Bank, and anyway, so there were a lot of new buildings going up that were especially for these entities that were ripping the planet off. So they had lots of money. And so his vision was that he was going to turn all these things into condos, just like what happened to Soho, just like what happened to the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side. Both were neighborhoods that were, but then they became popular, and people bought those buildings, rehabbed them, and sold them out for condos. And there were a lot of very nice apartment buildings. My parents lived in a place called the Imperial House, which was really an amazing building. That was, um, very George Jetson 1950s architecture built by an insurance company that had a lot of money, and they would put it into investments like that. And my parents lived there, and it was going to go co-op. And I don't know, why would I want to do that? Why do you tell people tell me whatever, right? And because he rented that place, he had a 3 bedroom, a 21st floor, overlooked, looked from up there over, um, Park Avenue into Madison and into past Lexington, into the park. We could see the park and all north. We had an amazing view. We're right on that corner, the northwest corner, and we had a veranda that went all the way around. It was beautiful, right? Covered, had 2 fireplaces, um, and it was like being in a hotel, meaning they doorman had a guy concierge, and it was automatic elevators, but they had elevator operators, and they had super duper fancy Chinese restaurant, super duper French restaurant, and that those restaurants, if you live in that building, the waiter and stuff would wheel up. You'd order it over the phone, and they would wheel it up to your thing, and they'd serve it to you, right? So they had a really nice apartment, and they were paying $600 in 1966 to 68, and then the building went co-op. And what was truly amazing was that if you had one of those apartments, you could get your apartment co-opted, and it would cost 50 grand. And the co-op um, entity would hold your paper, and you didn't have to put any money up, and you would own your apartment, and your mortgage, his mortgage would be $400 a month, and it would include his utilities. It was like, really? I don't want to live in a place like this. It was going to be cheaper and better than what it was when he was living there. And then he moved to from the Imperial House to this other place, which was again a very nice place. And when that was going down, um, I said to I was still, in high school, but I was also had my own apartment downtown the Lower East Side, working as an electrician for Mike Stoll. And so and the prep school I went to, it was like a jail, and we were there from end of September to the beginning of May, and we would go to school 7 days a week, and so we would, garnish the amount of hours you needed to graduate a lot faster than a kid going to a public school, because we were there and we were there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. because we had our sports was in the middle of the day because we didn't have any facilities. We had to walk 5 miles down the hill into the town and use the city pool, the town facilities, and it had been a very wealthy town in the from the 1890s to the Depression, and it was a center of making toys, and all these German guys. It's called Toy Town, and it was Winchendon, Massachusetts, and and the kids I went to school with were from the richest families on the planet, right? And my sophomore year, my roommate was Joe Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's middle son. He was a congressman, right? And he would complain that I was reading too much, because I was over there in my little bed with a light on reading a book. Why are you reading a book? And I said, well, Joe, it kind of, I'm interested in what I'm reading, and it kind of helps build my mind. So I'm a Kennedy. I don't have to read. And anyway, so we would get a whole month off for Christmas from around Thanksgiving to about the 15th of January. We would get off. And when I would go home, I had my apartment down in the Lower East Side. My roommate was Allen Ginsberg. I was working for, Mike Stoll, and I was working at the Fillmore East. I was having, time of my life. And my parents had no idea what I was doing, right? And I would come home only on Fridays because that's when my grandma would show up, and she would cook the big meal. And she'd be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And there would be the old Friday, with fish, Catholic Italian dinner, and then the Sunday dinner, which was the big woo, and so I would come back when grandma was there Friday. And, I had a place to sleep in that apartment, so I'd sleep there. And I'd hang with my grandma and my mom. My dad would just be watching television all the time, But my mom, she loved playing cards, right? And she loved playing Chinese checkers. And she would cheat like nobody's business. She always had to win. Always, always, always. So, of course, I'm smart enough. And when we were kids, my brother and sister would complain because you're cheating, Mom. And she would get upset when she'd be called on it. Whereas me, I just let her win, made her happy. Why not? I didn't need to win. Anyway, my grandma would be there crocheting, watching the game, just kind of chuckling. And then we'd stop and we'd have either coffee, espresso, or tea, whatever my mom wanted to drink. And my grandma would be part of it. And my mom was a really good baker. My grandma was the amazing cook, chef, right? And so my mom would always make a Kuchen, apple, cherry, raspberry, fruit Kuchen, right? And my grandma liked that. She was not a baker, And my mom, when she really felt moved, she would bake bread. And when they would do that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's when it went back to the old days when my dad was in the Air Force, and my mom lived with my dad's parents, and because once they kind of got rich, my mom treated my grandmother like almost a servant. But up until I was 21, it was still the old times, right? And grandma wouldn't be there all the time, just, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And sometimes she'd just be there Friday or just Sunday. And I would go back whatever day she was. And this place, they had, you put your laundry, and they had, the front door. And then they had a room for a servant. And they had the servant's entrance that was off the kitchen, right? And everything above the 18th floor were these really fireplaces, working fireplaces, right? In an apartment building, right? And a room for the maid, right? And her entrance and the kitchen. She had her own little area that was, so the big kitchen, and then there was like a littler kitchen that she could sit and do anyway. So I would either sleep in that room or my grandma would sleep. And there's three other bedrooms. And there was the master bedroom my parents had. It was really like a suite, had its own bathroom, really nice. It had a door that went out onto the veranda. It was very nice. And then there were two other bedrooms that were kind of over here, and they really didn't have windows, right? And they had these faux windows, lit by fluorescent light. I mean, it was very weird. And one was my sister's, and one was whoever of us was there if Grandma was there. And so one of those rooms, was tangentially my room, right? And it more or less was my mother's sewing room with a bed in it, right? And either my grandma and I would sometimes tag team whoever was she going to be in the maid's room or in the sewing room, and vice versa, right? And the maid's room had a TV in it, right? And if my grandma wanted to watch TV, she would be in there, and if she didn't, she'd be in the sewing room. And she was a sewer too, so sometimes she would, be doing her knitting or her. She really could do needlepoint really amazingly. So, and my mom was a real sewer. And back in the day, she used to make our clothes back before they got made it hit the big time. And she still liked to do that. Right? She made her own dresses, and she was dressed. To the day she died, she looked like a queen. She had really long hair, and she would put it up, and she could make her. My mom was gorgeous to the day, and she died at 103, and she was still gorgeous. Still had the bod. And so she never got fat. You know, she was a very shapely girl. It's only me and AI. So I would come home, and you could, if you put your laundry out by 7 each night, they would come and do your laundry, your shirts. They press the shirts and put them in boxes. My dad really liked that, and my mom hated doing laundry. So and this was gonna. So they could have bought this place for less than what they were paying rent for it. But my dad, I don't want to be blah blah blah, and so they moved to another place that wasn't quite as fancy. It was still a nice place, but not like this place. And about 5 years later, maybe longer, maybe 8 years later, when the real estate market was coming back in the mid 80s, when they were like cleaning up New York, after New York went bankrupt in the 70s. And trickle down economy went to all the rich people who bought up all the real estate, and the Japanese bought everything too. And so there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the new, um, you know, whoop-de-doo of condos. And it basically, part of that article was, if you were really a smart real estate guy, you would have bought your apartment in the Imperial House, because the people who bought it for $50,000 8 years later were selling their condos for 8 to 20 million. And we were in one of the really, we were up there with the fireplaces and the big veranda, and that was like, my dad could have made more money than he made in his business just on that one apartment, right? So when they were living in their other apartment, which was a nice place, but the rent just kept going up and up and up and up. And I brought the Wall Street home to my dad and I said, Dad, take a read of this. And the apartment they talked about that made the most money was his, because he had two fireplaces. Other ones had one. He had two fireplaces and this amazing veranda, right? The others had, little patios, but this had a veranda, the whole length, and it had a suite for the master bedroom. Anyway, I said, "Look, Dad, here's your apartment. You could have made 20 million." And my father, instead of, and when he told me about it. I said, Dad, you're nuts. You should buy this place. This is the best deal. You're going to make a lot of money if you do this. And that was 8 years, and I was still in high school. And anyway, back to Lower Manhattan. This guy was buying up all these buildings because he knew this time was going to come. And he made, he had to sit on that stuff for about 6 years. But so he had me redoing the services for when the time was coming. And, nobody wanted to rent these apartments. So he was like whacking out the walls, each floor of these buildings, had 2 or 3, really nice spaces, right? And I was helping him do it, like doing my theater design thing / laying out what these really nice condos could be. And so he let me have the top of this building. Nobody wanted it because it was covered in that much axle grease from those wheels and pigeon poop. There's no way of cleaning that out. But I had a friend who was a spray painter, and he would spray anything, right? And he was, in his art, he was spraying polyurethane, and he would make a frame and then spray the polyurethane, right? And then I was working at a foundry where I was spray metallizing. And then I got him I got him to buy one of these, because this technology is like from the 1890s, because they were building these big steel structures way bigger than they needed to be. So the weight of them were tearing themselves up. And so to save the bridges and the buildings and everything, they developed this process called spray metallizing, where they would spray a lattice of a metal, and then they would put a mesh on it and spray over that in a different metal. And they were using the electrolysis of dye, different types of metal to almost like a magnet hold these buildings and bridges together, And the Williamsburg Bridge was a good example. Manhattan Bridge, another example. And they added another 40 years to it, but those buildings were still way overbuilt. The only bridge of all of Manhattan that was truly an amazing thing was the Brooklyn Bridge, because the guy, all the things that make a bridge, a suspension bridge, he perfected. And he did the casement thing, going down deep and right in the water. He built a casement and dug down and to the bedrock and made the foundation. And people were getting the bends. And so he, realized what that was. And he was decompressing the workers so they wouldn't die. And the wires of the suspension bridge, he weaved with different metals, brasses and things, so they never corroded, even when birds pooped on them. And the only bridge that has really stood the time was the first one, the Brooklyn Bridge. And it has trains on it, and all the other, like the Manhattan Bridge, the subways were, the vibration of the subway trains were tearing the bridge apart. So my buddy came in and sprayed the whole thing, all the bird poop and all of the grease and all the oil with poly, basically fiberglass. It was a stronger polyurethane, but it was like fiberglass. And he would put resins in between each layer so it wouldn't glop up. And so he put about that much over all of that. And then the last one, he put a super duper shiny coat, and it was like glass. And all of the oil and bird poop of the weight of the fiberglass and the polyester and all the plastic he sprayed on there kind of compressed it, and it looked like a Bruegel / Pollock painting. It was amazing. It looked amazing. And then I lit it with theater lights, and there were all these different levels of stuff. And that was, where I lived. And I found these big tanks that were water tanks in Manhattan. You see all these water tanks on all these buildings, and that's for the sprinklers. So when they go up, the water doesn't have to be pumped up. It's already being held in these like 20,000-gallon tanks, and they just open it up and it puts out the fire. And so there was a company. I was working for George and George at the time, a big, 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 the number one best amazing theater company. They're the guys who did all the hydraulics for Cats. They're the guys who built all of the theaters for Cirque du Soleil. They did Lincoln Center and gigantic stages moving around for operas. And so I worked for them. I was their ME, master electrician. And that's how I got the gig at Carnegie Hall, because they redid Carnegie Hall. I became the ME, and that's how I met Michael Moody of Manhattan Theater Club. And we lit New York City for the 200th birthday, 1976, the big ships. And that's how I met my buddy who ran. And that's when I saw Vinny, my grammar school buddy, who was an admiral of the merchant marines, and he had got the merchant marine entity to get one of America's gigantic big ships and redo it and fix it up to brand new scale. And he captained that ship and had a crew of almost 300 guys and gals, and the masts were 200-300 feet high. I mean, it was just an amazing ship, and all of that for 4 years was like unbelievable synchronicity. Things just happened. I didn't plan anything. I didn't go after anything, and I had great opportunities. My father could have made hundreds of millions of dollars, because the real estate guy really liked me, and there were buildings down there that didn't quite fit what he needed, but they were unbelievable. He said, "You should buy this building." I said, "Yeah." So you're going to give me the $100,000 to buy it? But your dad's got some money. Go talk to him. And so I would take my father to see all these buildings in Soho and down there in Wall Street, about 20 different buildings, and he blew up every one. He would argue, "What, you want $80,000 for the job? How about 30?" Be insulting. And that was my dad. He had that, that insensitivity, the lack of. I mean, he was a pretty visionary guy. He had this great over the horizon. I mean, he was a entrepreneur, but with a lack of vision. It was like an oxymoron. And that was my dad. He was an oxymoron, my dad. And if it wasn't for my mom, he'd be, on the gutter, because my mom was really the brains of the scene. And my mom had this thing where she really didn't want any of her children to do any better than her. She had this sense of, she had this great aunt who was really rich, who loitered over everyone, and she was the favorite of that great aunt. And so she had a lot of auntie in her. And so, she wanted basically all her children to fail. And also, meaning that's why all my brothers and sisters worked for my parents, because both my parents did this to them. And I was the only one who went off and did my own thing. Now, both my parents were like proud of that I did that, but they sure didn't understand what the heck I was doing, My mom wanted me to be a bishop, She, I had a godfather who was a cardinal. So my life was already planned for the Catholic Church. Just happened a little more empathetic and was enamored with the teachings of Jesus Christ, and was trying to do what he was saying we should be doing: love my neighbor, not build an empire. So that was about it. Oh, look, about an hour, and there's still only two people there. And so that's, a little bit of a ramble. I don't know if this one's going to go up. But right at, 60, I'm going to say goodnight, because it's almost 9 o'clock and I'm going to go to bed. So it's 59, 59. Bingo. Okay.